What is up? This is the International Football Bros. So I'm Sam, the Hatteras Bay Mad Goats, and I'm here with Nathan with the Stellenbosch Saints. What's up, Nathan?
Hey Samuel, man, it's nice to finally put a face to a name. It's been good having a chat, and I'm looking forward to this, man. I'm looking forward to us talking some smack about the RFA and seeing what's up with everyone's team and the rebuilds, man.
Yeah, man, this is good. I'm glad we were able to communicate and like work this out. It's a blessing just to be able to be in the league with you, but now be able to share this space with you and just talk fantasy football and roster wars and just geek out. So it's nice.
No, man, likewise, man, likewise.
Sweet. So roster wars. What we're doing here today is we're geared up. We're going to talk about what just went down. A big part of roster wars every year is the RFA. So we're kind of just going to break down some stuff, talk about some insights that we may have. I mean, it's not like it's fantasy gold or nothing, but it's our processes. Maybe some people share, or maybe you can learn something, or maybe you can laugh at us. I'm sure. So that's kind of what we're doing for this episode, and we'll continue on doing this thing hopefully, and find more stuff to talk about. We got the draft coming up, so that's gonna be a lot of stuff to talk about. So
Yeah, no,
Nate's in the PP. So you got all the insight with PP. I'm in the TT, so I got that insight, and we can poke fun at the RR and DD.
no, exactly. The RR like talking a big game, but let's we'll get into the RFA shortly.
Yeah,
Yeah, Sam, as you said, like I think the first things first is let's sort of dig a bit deeper into sort of the Hatteras Bay Mad Goats, man. Tell me, yeah, in the last month and a half, what has been the thought process going into pre RFA? Just remind us about your tags and what sort of your mindset was going into RFA.
yeah, man. So I know everybody's always interested to hear about the Matt Goats, but yeah, I took this team 2 years ago. Was it 2 years now? And I've just been trying to make it my own. And so this past off season, and then this draft and the next draft is kind of what's going to culminate and help making this put this stamp on my team. So uh, I took a lot of prep in RFA. I kind of do a similar process every year. It changes, but I'll show a little bit of what I look for. I'm going to put this up on the screen. So this is what I look for. I'm sorry, this is just for the TT. So for those in the promising prospects, rising rookies, and Dashley doesn't, like, it's just take your teams and apply it if you were to do the same process I do. But I take all the teams. You can see right here in this left-hand column, starting off with the Charm City Justice, the Steel Cats, and I mark right next to them how many Warbucks they have to start off. And then I just kind of track the tags, like I'm sure some of us do, as they come up and as they become available when people post them. And I try to calculate over here how much it's going to cost for everybody to utilize those tags, and how much Warbucks they would have left over. So with that, that's what I look at to see who I'm going to possibly look at going after RFA, if they're a tag player, or who's going to be available if they're not tag players. So knowing how much Warbucks somebody has, and knowing how much, if they're trying to protect somebody, like for instance, like Greg did this past RFA. You see California Nightmare. So if they're green, that means they were bid on, or they got action in RFA. So he franchise tagged AJ Brown. So I knew right away, like, hey man, somebody's coming after AJ Brown. If they only got to pay a first round pick or a future first round pick. So you look at what he had Warbucks and how much he was going to be able to spend to protect him. And that's kind of how I prep it. And then this tag, this little tableau down here is not accurate anymore. But I kept it like a running tally of who had what picks. So like again, Justice, man, he had 1-1 and 1-2. I don't really think he's gonna. I don't really think he's gonna try to go after a franchise tag player if he's got to pay one of those picks. So I kind of knew that my franchise tag guy would be safe from Bill, and then I kind of go from there. So when I prep for RFA, it's a little bit of draft prep as well. Like I look to see what rookies are coming in and where I'd feel comfortable losing a guy, and that's kind of how I determine what tags I feel safe or I want to put on players.
Yeah, just asking you quickly, what is your opinion then of Greg not using the super franchise tag on AJ Brown? Like, if you're putting yourself in sort of Greg's shoes, there, do you think he we can obviously look back at it in hindsight. Do you think you made a mistake there? And what are the reasons for franchise tagging a player versus super franchise tagging them?
I mean, it's tough, man. So I think there's a lot that goes into it. Like with roster wars, there's so many wrinkles and so many different things you can do with building your team and how you manage it, and then and how you attack different levels of just roster construction or team building. I'm not Greg. I'd be one to. I mean, I'd be one to bet that he probably was looking to save a little bit of Warbucks by doing the franchise tag versus doing the super franchise tag. That super franchise tag is $100, man. So
Yeah,
it gets expensive real quick. You can see like the bottom three teams, Colin, me, and Easy. We used every tag available, and that look at that compared to what Bill did. Bill only spent 55, and we spent tons more than him. So by saving those Warbucks, it allows you to like go shopping in RFA, or it's a gamble,
yeah. And what's your opinion in terms of a rebuild team, or even a team that's sort of challenging for the title? Do you think do you think, how much does it influence the stage of your team, whether you use all the tags, or is it more a personnel thing that is the actual deciding factor on whether you use all the tags or not?
Yeah, man, I think that's an excellent question, because I think there's no right or wrong answer. You can just look at it here. Like, I'm a rebuilding team. I was the 1-2. Easy won the whole league. He was the 112. So, yeah. And we both used all of our tags. Whether that was smart of me or not, I don't know. But I look at the players I tagged, and I think they're all kind of worthy of getting a tag. So what I did,
and I think further to that as well is you see your two big tags, your super franchise tag and your franchise tags. They're both quarterbacks. They're both crucial positions. I'm sort of looking back over your team, and you've obviously still got Trey Lance on a 5-year contract. You have Zach Wilson, unfortunately, on a 3-year contract, and you got Daniel Jones on 2. So you didn't need to necessarily take both these quarterbacks. But as you say, like, I think Trey Lance and obviously having Brock Purdy is a great sort of balancing act there. And you've got Darnold to have the holy trinity there, and then obviously with Deshaun Watson, that's a no-brainer in terms of a super franchise tag. And I think using those quarterbacks as sort of trade leverage later down the line is obviously something which could come in very handy for your team rebuilding quicker, I imagine.
Yeah, man. Superflex league. You got teams that win and win a lot without having 2 stud quarterbacks. That's the way I dynasty, the way I do Superflex. I mean, I didn't do it when I started off, but I started learning real quick that I just feel more comfortable if I have those positions taken care of, because outside of the draft, it's really hard to get a quarterback, man, especially without giving one back. So that's kind of why I chose those 2. But to go to the other question, I think it all depends on like what your league mates are doing. So you see, like Bill didn't have hardly anybody to tag. Haji didn't have hardly anybody to tag. If people are going to leave guys out there that I feel are taggable and I can get them for cheap, like I think I got Danielle Hunter for a future 4th, and then comped him and got 30 Warbucks. I ran a risk doing that, but if other people are zigging, the way I like to do it is I'll zag, and I'll use those tags and do different things than someone else is doing to try to gain an advantage. Yeah, so I don't think it's based off of if you're rebuilding or if you're champion. Is based off of kind of what your roster looks like and who's expiring contracts and all that and who's available.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine for you, the transition from obviously the Futures League up into the main league, you're obviously inheriting an orphan there, and it's not a dispersal like quite a lot of the new guys who start in the Futures League. They tend to have a dispersal, and it sort of feels like their team from the start. Whereas when you're obviously taking over a team in the main league, I think it is quite difficult, because more often than not, the team does have quite a few hiccups. It does have a few speed bumps, and it is about sort of rebuilding that. Look at sort of even Haji, and since he's moved up, Collins obviously done incredibly well to turn his team around so quickly. Bob and obviously Sty, their interesting sort of change in sort of divisions. I think a lot of these future guys that do go up, I think it does take a season or 2 to actually sort of rebuild that core of your team going forward. And I think the tags then become even more so important in sort of a new team into that league.
Yeah, if you're not like looking at your roster and planning ahead, and especially looking at the contracts, like if you go to trade for somebody, like I already have them all mapped out. Who are my 1 year guys? Who are my 2 year guys? Who do I look at that I might possibly be using a tag on? And that way, if I enter a trade negotiation with Sty or whoever, and he's one, and it's a deal for a dude that's going to be on a 1 year deal that expire at the end of the year. Like, am I ready to take that investment? And is it going to be something that I can use and protect and keep long term, or is it a short term guy that I need to like look at something else because I'm not going to be able to protect him? So it's a lot of balance act for me.
No, exactly. So now, sort of moving on from sort of the tag side of things, how did, obviously you've used all 5 of your max tags. You go into RFA with what, 88 odd Warbucks there. What was your, how many other zero or sort of free agent players did you have going into RFA that you were hoping to retain, and what were your thoughts around the rest of your squad going into RFA?
So for me, man, this was my RFA. These 5 guys. I had a couple guys here and there that I had that I was looking at or I wanted to buy on the cheap, but I knew that the majority of my money was going to be spent on these guys, and I felt like somebody was going to come after Deontay Johnson, which they did, and so I felt like I needed to save money for that. So outside of these guys, I had like guys that I would spend 5 to 10 Warbucks on at max, but I did a lot of movement when we were in the RFA. Because it's weird how things work, and every conference is different. But when people use the comp tags like that, that's tactical. It's got a tactical significance because all of a sudden you're putting money back into somebody's account. When the transition tags are called out or even franchise tags are called out, it kind of puts people on notice, and it always seems to like cascade down where you'll see one after the other once that door is open.
I see. Obviously, a big part of your RFA was your trade with the Justice there. Because you obviously sort of traded and you ended up with a 90 Warbucks. Remind us all, what was that trade? What did the trade include?
So I gave him the 2-1 in this draft, which is the 13th rookie, and this is obviously RFAs before the draft. So like I said, I do a little bit of draft prep beforehand, and I kind of find out where my comfort zone is. Pre-draft, my comfort zone was 7. I felt like there were 7 guys that I really liked, and then there was a drop off after that. So I felt like after that, like 8 and on was kind of pick your guy season. And I felt comfortable enough that, hey, what I did is I traded him 2-1 and a 2026 first for that 90 Warbucks. And the intention of that was to solidify getting Brandon Ayuk and keeping Deontay Johnson. So I kind of balanced it as like these 2 guys are worth more than that 2-1 and that future first is a future Sam problem, So that was my thought logic going into that.
Yeah.
And then watching the draft, I'm like, man, the drop off is actually for me a lot earlier than 7 now.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And I think you've also you quite well loaded for future firsts anyway. I think what do you have 3 or 4 future firsts next season?
So, yeah, I got 4 firsts next season.
Exactly. So you had that draft capital to basically cash in for Warbucks, which is what you needed to as you say protect protect two of your important building pieces. And these are 2 young receivers who should have longer careers and should be sort of producing at elite levels, as you say, better than that drop off in the draft. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense, those moves that you made.
Yeah, man. Like I said, like we already talked about, it's crazy how just unique each conference is going to be and unique the RFA process is. Like, you never know. Pigskin's Matt kind of started it all off by trying to get a second round pick. You can see in the table he had one, but for like half of RFA he didn't. And then as soon as he acquired one, you knew that that's what he does, man. The fireworks are on. He's coming hunting for some transition tags, and once that starts happening, it's like your butthole puckers and you're just trying to ride the storm,
Yeah. Have you, obviously you've only been in the main league now for the last 2 years, but you've sort of obviously watched it since you've been in the league. Do you, excuse me, have you sort of created some sort of understanding that you feel you understand the league members in the main league and sort of their personalities around RFA, or like some people, like for example, Sty is maybe an unpredictable person when it comes to RFA, whereas other people might be a bit more predictable. Some people sort of leave it late, or do you find everyone is quite different and varies at different stages?
Oh, I think it's variable, man. And I think like my expectations coming in this RFA, and I said it like towards the end of the year last year when Bill just like started piling up draft picks, piling up the Warbucks. I told everybody like, man, you better lock your doors because Bill's going to come hunting RFA. Like, there's no reason for him not to. And Bill's an active owner, and he definitely will. You know, if you go look at his roster now, like he was bottom 4 last year just from some bad luck. He did get beat by a really great team, the Hatters Bay Mad Goats, but his team is like dominant right now, and it's because he took everything he had with the picks and the Warbucks, and he maneuvered himself around, and he's going to be a force this next year. So I kind of looked at it, and like you can look and see where people are at, but then you always have that Sty factor. Sty came in to TT, and he's a hurricane, man. He's just turning things around. So you can't predict Sty.
No, but that's the beauty of this league. We've got 46 or close to 40 odd managers, right? And I think each league is unique. Each league has unique individuals who are unpredictable, and that's the beauty of this league. There are not many super active leagues where you've got 4 12-team divisions and everyone can sort of go in different directions. And we all play under the same rules, but we all play in different games.
Yeah.
So it's a really unique thing, and as you say, you sort of have to stick to your courses. I think a lot of teams will get sucked into or sidetracked from the bigger picture of what they're focusing on, and I don't know how to sort of sum up your RFA. Were you quite pleased where you ended up? Do you think there were areas or maybe individuals that you bid on or didn't bid on that you regret not doing so, or how would you sort of summarize your RFA?
Yeah, man. I walked out of the RFA, you know, liking what I got. I wish I could have kept that future first, but like Sam Prop, it kind of it's funny because like the way RFA goes, it always feels like at the end when you look back, it's you can get like the first round of players that go off the board, they're kind of a little cheaper because everybody's kind of testing the waters. And then later on, you start seeing guys go, you're like, man, I'm bidding 10 Warbucks on this safety, and I could have got this other safety that I like better for 5 2 weeks ago. And it's a dangerous game to play. But once again, like if you're playing protection mode where I'm trying to make sure I don't spend too many Warbucks for, you know, to save up for protecting the guy, like you got to do what you got to do. What about you? What's your approach when you get ready for RFA?
Yeah, so obviously I've now finished sort of two seasons. I've done 2 RFAs, 2 sort of rookie drafts. So I would still consider myself a very relatively new, but at the same time, the futures it changes so quickly. Before you realize it, you're sort of an established member in the futures league. And the first RFA, I was just absolutely guns to the wall, sort of bidding on everyone and getting way too involved. And I sort of stung myself in the foot a little bit last year. I had in sort of my rookie year, it wasn't too bad because I ended up sort of incredibly I won sort of chapter 7, but only just by sort of points differential. But then last year I had quite a lot of big injuries. I made quite a few reckless trades at certain times. Obviously, I got rid of sort of Josh Allen for sort of Trey Lance and a first and kind of pieces. And from that point onwards, I was very much, okay, I need to sort of go into rebuild. Ended the season last year at 2-10. Stupidly, I'd already previously traded away my first for 2023 in my rookie season. So there was a lot of learning curves, and I sort of had to learn how to adapt. But I knew very much so that my team is going through a transition where I need to sort of rip it down and sort of build it back up. So based off the fact there, I was looking for sort of future firsts. So I've now got 3 firsts in 2024. My own included, and then going into RFA, it was very much I could see sort of the horizon in the sense that I've got guys coming up for RFA in 2024. Like I've got Kyler Murray, I've got Michael Pittman Jr. I've just traded away Logan Wilson for a second, just because I feel like I need to start thinking the bigger picture. And then other than that, there are not too many. There's a few smaller IDP guys, like you can say your Leighton Van Der Esch's and your Grant Delpits who might be worth considering extending or even TTing if they have another big season or if they have a big season. But I feel like I've staggered it out relatively well, that I should be able to rebuild and hopefully come back in the next season or 2. But I was speaking to you just before we started recording, and it's so difficult to actually rip it all down. I think
Mhm.
I really struggled to go through RFA and be like, well, I'm going to need some depth somewhere. So I go and I think I ended up picking up Demario Davis, for example, but I picked up Demario Davis for 4 Warbucks. So like again, I'm a Saints fan, so I'm a bit biased to a player like that. But the reality is in hindsight, that's actually a really silly bid for me because uh, he's only going to make my team a little bit better, which right now that defeats what I should be trying to do. I should be patient. I should be sort of looking at the youngsters and building from there. But I don't know. It's natural human in you to try still be
Yeah.
competitive.
Yeah,
But
it's
no,
hard. It's hard to lose. It's hard to sit there and just take an L every day or every week.
yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah.
And obviously, the biggest fear is the one thing I desperately don't want to be as Pink. So I just want to make sure that I somehow solidify the 101 or the 102 or the 103 next year in the PP. But at the same time, I just stay away from Pink as
that's
much as
a
possible.
that's a fine line, man. It's this year. It's collapse for Caleb, but don't get pink. So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
it's going to be a rough one. But yeah, to your point where you're talking about with looking at future years and the what you got coming up, like I think that's varsity level, and I'm sure we play with a lot of seasoned owners. So I'm sure a lot of them do it. But have you tagged anybody that wasn't an expiring contract, like given the extension clause?
So I did strongly think about it this year. So I strongly thought about extending Kyler Murray. However, at the same time, he's young enough that I almost want to actually. I nearly even considered actually buying out his contract and super franchise tagging him. So I was thinking of doing the flip side where I'll pay over and above just to sort of bankroll it because I didn't have many tags this year. I think I only used the franchise tag this year on Nick Bosa. That was the only tag I used. No one came in knocking for him, so I'm pretty happy to have kept him for 50 Warbucks.
Yeah.
Uh, so in hindsight, maybe I should have thought because I'm sort of sitting at the end of RFA and I've got 100 Warbucks or I've got 90 Warbucks now in the kitty. So I've got enough that will take quite a bit of the blow next year if I do need a super franchise tag because I do foresee myself looking to have to franchise tag Kyler Murray and then the following year it's CD Lamb. So I've got 2 big super franchise tags coming up, which was what I was just vigilant of. At the
Yeah.
same time, I could well have extended someone like CD Lamb, but to me, these guys are young enough that it's worth not spending that 20 Warbucks on the extension. Rather wait, just spend the 100 Warbucks and just give him a 5-6 year contract, whatever you need to make sure that he sort of ends a Saints player. But at the same time, we all know how those long term contracts can go sometimes, and a guy gets injured or a guy retires or something happens.
Yeah.
It can all go very pear-shaped. Correct me, Sam. It was you that had Andrew Luck on a long contract. You're
I
just
had
gonna,
I had him on a long contract, but not like Nick. Nick was the one that had him on like forever contract, and it just
oh,
wasn't good for him.
as you said. Look, that's freak. It would be interesting to historically go back and look at all the super franchise tags, and maybe that's a project for someone or even myself if I get some time. Is to look at all the super franchise tag players over the last 5 years or 6 seasons or whatever,
Yep.
and actually see how well invested that 100 Warbucks was, because that'd be an interesting little article.
Well, you got Matty Rottweilers that he has like a whole formula he does with how many Warbucks you spend and how it equates to contract years and draft capital and geo tagging locations. And you saw that article today. That was pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
it was awesome, man. It was great.
But yeah, this is why one of the amazing things you have about Roster Wars is the different tactical ways you can address things and look at things. Like you said, with you got those upcoming tags that will be coming, and you kind of so you didn't use an extension, so you held on to it. I did. I had Daniel Jones. He was on a 1-year deal, and I had a couple other guys on 1-year deals, and I prioritized extending him because I wanted to offset some of those tags I knew had coming up. So it's just different way people approach things, and it's fascinating to me, like watching and seeing different people do different things.
Look, to me, the real thing with the extension tag is I personally would be quite hesitant to use it on a player I think I will inevitably use a super franchise tag on, because then you're paying $20 extra just to sort of kick the bucket for 1 year, whereas rather just save those 20 war bucks and defend someone in RFA, or go out and get some more, or maybe even put that on top of a transition tag and make it a bit more affordable to go after someone else, knowing very well that you will inevitably have to spend the 100 war bucks. Kyler Murray is someone that if he does come back fit, he deserves a super franchise tag. CD Lamb, if he has another good season, he will be a super franchise tag quality player. Like that's the sort of thing. And that's why I
You
asked
have them on
you,
are they on the same expiring contract like deals or no?
no,
Oh, okay.
so it's I've got Pittman, I've got Michael Pittman Jr. and I've got Kyler Murray next year. So they both on 1 year. But yeah, it'll be, as you said, it'll be interesting to see sort of how further it goes
Yeah.
down the line.
So button up your RFA. Did you like what you did? Is there stuff you wish you would have done differently, or what all did you see on the PP side?
Yeah, so yeah, sort of look, I've obviously already sort of touched base on the Saints themselves, like myself already.
Yeah.
It was a relatively good RFA. I didn't. I sort of, because I'm rebuilding. I'm quite happy with my IDP side. I'm quite happy defensively, and when I say happy, I've got sort of the Bosa brothers. I've still got Shaq Leonard and DeForest Buckner. That to me, they're not really that. They're not very useful if I'm sort of rebuilding. So I will at some stage look to trade them late in the season or even earlier. But I picked up Tremaine Edmonds using a transition tag. So I went after him with the Badgers. I gave up a 204, which was quite an early second round, but I just felt that, as you said, there was such a fall off, and I just felt he was one of the transition tags I'd go after, and sort of to help out the defense there. And then I picked up sort of Elijah Mitchell, Michael Carter, sort of these backup running backs for sort of 10 warbucks, which again, maybe I did overspend there, but I'm really lean at running back. I've only got Cam Akers. So I was sort of needing just a little bit of young something there. I went after sort of Chase Claypool and Curtis Samuel. So I felt my offense was quite light and quite thin. So I was trying to pick up guys who were young enough that maybe something might happen. Hopefully there's a bit of a ceiling, but at the same time, that could well sort of go pear-shaped. But sort of skimming through the PP, it was quite an interesting sort of year. I think the Mayhem obviously sort of they sort of came out guns blazing. I've put together a few sort of stats here. They started with about 200 warbucks. Carla ended up spending about 180 warbucks during the RFA, of which 160 of them were on IDP defensive side. She picked up Pete Werner for 56. She picked up Dre Greenlaw for 40. She picked up Jeremy Chin for 40 as well. So she went all out on the defensive side of the ball, did Carla. Then you obviously had the new boys, the counselors. They were pretty well balanced, sort of spent about 120 and sort of 80 on both sides. But then again, I was speaking to you as well beforehand. The enigma that is Keith and the Cyclone City Falcons. This man is walking into RFA and the PP with 380 warbucks. He hardly uses a tag, and then he proceeds to only spend about 100 warbucks, and now he's sitting on 280 warbucks still. And I don't know, you obviously had quite a lot of competitive seasons in the PP with Keith, but you mentioned he's done this year on year. It's almost becoming predictable. When is it going to change?
I mean, we had someone in TT that did that with Craig and just like sat on him, and it's always that fear when you have somebody that has that many warbucks. Like, man, when they do like pounce, they're gonna draw blood on everybody. So it's all depending on when they're gonna do it or not, you know.
Yeah, no, agreed. And he had the sort of first in hand, and he's got the team that's sort of there and thereabouts. Like I think he's got quite a few handy little young players sort of in that squad. I think he's got, correct me if I'm wrong, he's got Justin Fields. He's obviously a little bit needy at quarterback because he's got sort of Zach Wilson and sort of Malik Willis and stuff. But there weren't too many quarterbacks out there, but there were pieces like Kirk Cousins, I think, and a few other sort of half and half sort of quarterbacks where they will definitely make you competitive, but whether they'll put you over the top, who knows? But he is going into the draft this year with quite a lot of, I think he does have the 101. He's got the 101 and the 104. and he's got the 201, 203, 205, 207. So he's got a hell of a lot of draft cap. So I imagine Keith will sort of make moves there, and whether he trades up or whether he trades back, it'll be interesting. He'll have a big influence on what happens there in the PP.
Yeah. So you mentioned something though that I wanted to ask about. So I always had the feeling that people tend to spend a lot more in RFA on defensive players for whatever reason. And you mentioned Carlos spent 160 out of 180 on IDP. Do you get that sense too that the IDP kind of goes a little more heavily in RFA than offensive guys do?
I think so. And I think that's fundamentally driven by the draft. And I think because a lot of people feel that they can anticipate or see ceilings on offensive players through the draft. So usually, this is obviously generalizing, but in your first 2 rounds in most rookie drafts here, maybe you've got 2 or 3 IDP players in that. Maybe 4 at maximum if it's a good year. So I think a lot of people feel that they can hit in the draft on offensive side. Therefore, RFA, maybe they want sure pieces.
That's a fair point.
So I think, obviously, again, it depends whether or not you have the draft capital to do that. But I also think that I think there's a lot more competition on the defensive side of things, where I think the positions are a bit deeper as well. And because they're, again, I generalize. I don't think many people are IDP gurus or actually understand the real in-depth side of IDP. So therefore, they're willing to spend a little bit extra to get that depth. So you sort of overpick or over sort of bid to have that extra linebacker or have that extra edge rusher or have that extra defensive tackle, because you don't know who's going to start or what's going to happen there. And that's what sort of causes, I think, a lot of them to get bid up, as well as people like retaining their IDP. If they have a good IDP player, they're going to do whatever they can, because they more likely won't use a tag on IDP side of things. So they'll end up having to sort of retain them through the RFA.
Yeah. So that drives me to my next question, is the comp tags. Like, you can see, I got a slide here. It shows all the comp tags. You can see on the comp tags who used them, how much they went for, and it just like overwhelmingly in favor of the defensive guys. Like, if you use a comp tag on a defender over an offensive guy, you made out like a bandit in most cases.
Yeah.
But like, you look at DD, man, there was 4 people that used comp tags at all. Whereas in TT it was everybody but 4. It was 8. So there's obviously a disparity here on how people use or view this compensation tag. Like, what do you look at? Yeah, you didn't use one. So what is kind of your basis on how you approach this?
Yeah, I think if you, I don't know, I didn't go after a comp tag either. I sort of tried to bid a few up, but I feel like I don't know. It's very difficult. It all depends on what sort of, how your team's sort of lining up and what position you're in. I think if you have the luxury of having an elite player, like what Andy did, for example, with Tyreek Hill, even the Malosos with Derek Carr, and then obviously Easy with sort of Oyosade. Like, these are elite players in their
game changers in RFA to get
right. And Andy obviously had enough depth. Sort of the Malosos had enough depth, and obviously Easy had enough depth in those positions to say, look, let's throw it out there. Let's see what happens. There was obviously a brief stage in my mind when I did own Josh Allen, and he was on a 1 year last year. That's also why I traded him, because I didn't want to spend the super franchise tag on him, which I'll probably regret until the day I leave Roster Wars. But we'll that's a different conversation. But if you are in the position where you do feel this is not your year, or even if it is your year, if you can blow the roof off with a player like a Tyreek Hill, you know you're going to return big value. But I think the rest of them, all the guys in the range between sort of, as you say, 10 Warbacks to 20 Warbacks, to me, that's just, it's quite high risk. And if you've got the Warbacks to take that risk, fine. But at the same time, It's only really if you feel your team is in the position to. Like, even look on the RR side, you've got the Blitz obviously had Nick Bosa, and again 77 Warbucks, and I think he's gone back-to-back championships. He's an unbelievable team, and he needed the Warbucks there. It was obviously catching up to him, the sort of Warbuck salary cap. So he went Nick Bosa out there and sort of rebuilt through there. So yeah, I think the other risk with the comp tag is when your comp tag gets nominated.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge influence, which again you have no control over. So it's a risky thing, but I don't know. Who did you use your comp tag?
I use it on Daniil Hunter, but I agree with all your points, man. It is risky, right? And you can't control when it's going to come out. If it comes out like there was defensive ends going in TT, and I wanted them to clear the board to where when my guy finally did make it up there, that there was no one better out there, and that kind of makes me think that, hey, look, the price is gonna be driven up because of the necessity of, hey, this is it. But there's also like this mental thing that everybody plays where it's a comp tag. I know I'm giving you money by bidding on a comp tag.
Yeah.
So, I kind of feel, I don't know if there's truth to this or whatever, but I kind of feel like, hey, they probably would have went for more if there wasn't that, that psychoanalysis of, hey, I'm building you up by doing this.
I think that's more evident in the futures than in the main league. I think in the main league, because people have built up quite big war chests for such a long time, they're happy to sort of bid on comp tag players. Whereas I do think in the futures, because you don't have as experienced campaigners, you've got a lot of new guys sort of joining, or especially in the PP side of things. But the reality is you've got guys that don't understand the tag enough, so all they see is, oh, this money is going to my competitor, this Warbuck. So like, to me, a perfect example is the Mungman, and obviously Corbin's sort of put Chris Jones up there, who in my opinion is a top 10 sort of defensive tackle, and if not higher than that, and he only went for 7 Warbucks. So Corbin ends up losing 3, which is absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Someone like Darnell Mooney, I think it was obviously just bad timing there. Like, it was sort of, he's a talented player, and Fields is obviously growing, but at the same time, it is sort of luck of the draw and when these players are nominated during RFA, and sometimes you almost need to be a bit streetwise. I remember in my first year, I comp tagged Damian Harris, the running back, when he was still sort of at the Patriots, and he was looking all right. But I knew straight away, all my nominations have to be running backs, because I have to get all the running backs off the board, or all the good running backs, so that someone is forced to go after Damian Harris in the comp tag. So there are ways about doing this.
So that's the thing. I think that's another hidden gem that people don't realize or don't talk about, is there is tactical significance of who you open bids on.
Absolutely.
If you're just willy-nilly and just putting a player up there, like, you should have some kind of direction and some kind of, reasoning why you're doing everything you're doing. And I definitely agree with you there. Like, if I want my guy to get the most, I want to have everybody else off the board to where supply and demand is there in favor of me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you said with Chris Jones, like, look at the disparity though. So in PP he went for 7. Look what he went for in TT. Like, that's a difference of knowing your league mates, or supply and demand of what's available. James Conner was another one I looked at. He matched out his 10 his comp tag price, but if over in the TT, Easy uses a transition tag on him. So it's you got to kind of, it's not a one size fits all. It's every league is going to be different, and a lot of it's going to depend on what is available in that RFA. But for me, I will most likely, I know I have this far, always use a comp tag, because if I can get if it's a player that I don't want to retain, then why not try to get a profit from him? Because if I'm going to lose him anyway in RFA, there was 2 instances where people lost money, and then 4 instances where they broke even. Everybody else at least gained some kind of money from it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's as you say, I think it's something that I'll probably consider once my team has sort of transitioned to where I'm happy with it to be. than it is. And as you say, it's sort of also luck of the draft as well. Well, I wouldn't say luck; it's doing your homework, because if you end up having a very good draft or a strong draft, and you cover the costs and the depth in a certain position, it does afford you the luxury to comp tag an elite player. Like, let's say in our draft, I sort of hit on late quarterbacks like a Hendon Hooker or Will Levis or Jake Hayner. Say Derek Carr gets injured and Jake Hayner at the Saints becomes something, whatever. Like, the reality is then I might be in the position where I say, hell, let's put Kyler Murray up for comp tag and see what happens. Like,
Yeah.
it is how you. It is a combination of sort of the perfect storm, and I haven't looked at Andy's team too closely, but obviously the balls to put up someone like Tyreek Hill, knowing very well, hell, like if he gets anything less than 100, it's almost a failure, because he's a super franchise tag caliber player.
Yeah.
It's also interesting because again, that's where the franchise tag comes in, and the difference between getting a draft pick from this draft and the future draft is that essentially you almost always want it to be the future draft and take the comp, because also the future draft pick is variable. It might not necessarily be the 112 or the 212 or the
Oh,
211.
buddy, there's tactical involvement in that too, and I will apologize for Colin for about to spill these beans, but I'll tell you what happened in TT. So Sty went bidding on Brandon Ayuk, right? And Sty and I were kind of in a competition for Brandon Ayuk. Sty at the time didn't have a second round pick, so he was bidding a future second, and I had the means available to go up by a Warbuck or 5 Warbucks or whatever I wanted to up Sty and get the new bid, but I waited. I waited till Sty's transition tag was off the board and he had a second round pick, because I didn't want Colin to get a bunch of extra Warbucks on top of a pick. So
Yeah.
like the tactical significance of that, I know that probably pissed Colin off, because he would have rather have not matched and got 100 Warbucks and a future second instead of getting 50 Warbucks and 25 Warbucks and the 212. But you got to know what you're doing.
No, absolutely. Like, I think that, as you say, and that's the beauty of this. There's so many different interpretations how different people like it, and that's only the responsibility on every individual in Roster Wars. Like, that's on you guys. That's on us. Like, reading your team, understanding your team, looking at your opponents, whether it's just in your conference or whether it's in other conferences or whether it's in other chapters or whatever. Like, it's accumulating that knowledge, and that's what makes this place such a little nugget of absolute high competition, but fun, man.
Yeah. Did you see anything in RFA, like through PP, DD, anybody out of all the conferences that kind of surprised you, or like what the things were?
So I did a little bit of homework on the DD side of things, and yeah, it was interesting. Look, obviously those teams. Let me sort of get it up here, because the different teams at sort of different stages where they were, because you've got some teams like the Silver Ballers who are absolutely rebuilding, but at the same time, if you look at like, for example, one interesting bid I thought from the Silver Ballers was they went and got Brandon Cooks for $20 more. Again, Brandon Cooks, he's a good player, and I'm sure you'll have a pretty decent year now, being the clear number 2 sort of in Dallas. But again, I don't necessarily think that that's the perfect player for someone like Derek right now in a rebuild. Then you go through. There was a lot, again, as you said, there was a lot of Warbucks spent on the defensive side of things. Even look at at the guttabouts, because you've got a situation there where they ended up spending 150 Warbucks during RFA, of which 110 of the 150 was on the defensive side of things. So he picked up Grant Delpit for 25, Milano for 15, Rashawn Gary for 20, Caden Ellis for 25. So it was interesting just to sort of go through where sort of the sort of pressure points were. Like Carla spent over 200 Warbucks, including sort of trades, of which 170 of the 200 Warbucks she spent was on the defensive side of things. So again, it's seriously weighted there. Someone else now. So the Molosis, obviously with Tom, he spent in total about 100 Warbucks net, because he obviously got back such a big amount for Derek Carr on the comp tag. He got 90 back, but so he spent 250 Warbucks, of which 180 was on the offensive side. So Tom obviously needed to go that route, and who did Tom picked up? Gabe Davis 15. And he obviously sort of went after sort of a few other sort of players there. But it's interesting to see the different tactics. I think there's a lot more economy of scale in the main league. Guys have got bigger war chests, and I think that leads to elevated, or when I say elevated, much higher value for players versus the futures. And that's where I think you need to differentiate when you're sort of starting in the futures, is saying, look, even though he went for 60 Warbucks, I'll be happy with 40 in the futures or whatever, if it gets there. What's your feeling from sort of the outside looking at the DD? Do you think sort of there's a bit of a change of pace there? Obviously, Andy won it the year before, and then we had the Dragons. They missed out in the championship, I think, last year. Do you think there's a bit of a change on the DD side of things?
I mean, you look at those teams. I think you still got like the top 4 or 5 dominant teams that are going to be in the mix every year. And I can't remember who said it. It was probably Andy that said it. Like, hey, if you just get to the playoffs, then that's what your successful season is, because anything can happen once you get there. But that's kind of what you're going for. And so I think that those teams are more or less, they're trying to improve, but they're also trying to hold the pieces they got because they know they're in that window. So I think that, like what you said earlier about the balls, and I agree. Like the balls to put up Tyreek Hill, because when you're moving off of a player like that, like you are hoping you're getting out 1 year early. And then, that player's got a year left, and then they start, declining. So, hey, look, you got out at max possible value you could. So that, for me, at least in my head, if I were to put in that situation, I put Tyreek up. That's my headspace. Like, hey, I'm doing this because I'm trying to get out at the max possible, and it's just going to decline from here. So the fact that he was able to get that 100 and whatever it was Warbucks out of him, that's crazy money in RFA.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing I noticed as well, sort of looking at Johnny English and the Dragons, is obviously what they were sort of the DD champion last year and got to the championship game against Eazy-E. But in terms of their RFA, a big portion of their Warbucks spent was on retaining players, which is what you expect. Jeremy Chin, he retained for 30. Cole Holcomb retained for 30. Josh Sweat retained for 12. Quinnen Williams retained on a franchise tag for an extra 20. Okonkwo, the tight end in Tennessee, he was retained for an extra 10 on his TT. So it's also quite interesting. You can see that the good teams, it's all about a damage control as well, not losing these players, because if they're not willing to use all 5 tags, they know that money is going to have to go into protecting their key pieces and their key players as well. Whereas on the flip side, you've got someone like the Silver Ballers, and they only retained 2 players. The Nighthawks, they didn't retain any players. They didn't protect any of their players. So whether or not their squad just wasn't strong enough where they weren't getting poached on or sort of weren't getting bid on, that's also the debate. Maybe they didn't have any good players to get bid on, or at the same time, maybe they were looking for sort of a bit of a clear out.
See, and that's where it gets dangerous, in my opinion, is you look at those teams that have high Warbook total, and it's one or two ways they're going to proceed, right? They're either playing protect or they're playing I'm going spinning. And I know in like TT, Bill started off with 406 Warbucks, and like I showed you, like he only had 3 tags. Like he had plenty of money to go and build his team the way he wanted. Like that right there, I'm more afraid of players with that kind of build and that mentality, or going to RFA with that kind of tactics, than somebody that's playing protect. Because if they're playing protect, they're really not going hunting. They're just waiting, and having to protect their guys as they get bid on.
Yeah. No, exactly. What I think, did you have a little look at the RR side of things? Did you?
Man. So you were talking about Keith having all that money and sitting on. I was kind of confused. Like it's hard to keep up during RFA, man. It's just a busy time of the year, and you're knee deep in your conference. But so like from the outside looking in, and then looking now, like seeing Matt, the Rottweilers, like starting off with 250 Warbucks, and he only bought like 5 players. I don't know. Like I need to go look at his team and see maybe that's what he needed, or that's all he needed. But Matt's kind of always been known to hold those Warbucks. And when I look at it and I look at teams that have a bunch of Warbucks going into the season, like that's what scares me next season. You get these teams like we talked about Craig, he lost AJ Brown, right? But he got because his pick from Hanyang was a future first. All of a sudden, he had an extra 140 Warbucks. So it's either he goes hunting this year in RFA with that money, or he waits until next year, and that's kind of what Bill did. He got an influx last year from somebody getting his franchise tag, and he just waited it out and went shopping this year. And so you kind of gotta look and anticipate what everybody else is doing, so you can build your strategy that's gonna work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as you say, each like we know gurus here. We just have our opinions. We're just sharing our opinions. This is how we do things, and this is how we interpreted it. If you got anyone else on here, if you got Mike from the Legion, if you got Mike from the Blitz, if you got Mike from the Gators, if you got anyone else on here, they would have different opinions on.
Yeah, Mike. So Mike from the Legion went spending, man. He spent. So he went into it with 147, and ended up getting an influx from some couple different trades while he was there, but he ended up with 7 Warbucks. He went buying some players, some ones that I think are going to be really important for him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, Mike and I are obviously very close sort of in London, and I see quite a bit of him. And it's been nice sort of entering the league when sort of he did. And we've sort of grown together through the process of acclimatizing to roster wars. And yeah, man, he's making shapes. He's making moves. He obviously told me he was pretty gutted or quite upset when the comp. When they went after the Dre Greenlaw, because he had basically spent all his Warbucks, and almost overcooked it. And this is obviously a risk of going into RFA is not in the back of your mind being aware that people will come after, especially on the TT side. For just a second, they'll come after some good players. And if you don't have the Warbucks to protect yourself, then you will get exposed. And he was obviously upset to lose someone like Dre Greenlaw, but he went straight away and just reinvested that TT into Aaron Donald, because the man's obviously making a move and trying to make a push.
Oh yeah, Aaron Donald, Nick Bosa. A lot of people are on Jack Sanborn, so he retained him. He got a couple of different pieces just on the offense that just that can end up being big time things, like Adam Thielen for 10, Jacoby Myers, James Conner for 10. Like my personal opinion on Arizona is I think they're in that collapse for Caleb race, man. So I think that James Conner is going to get a big workload. So I think 10 more bucks on James Conner, that might pay off dividends for him. And so
no, absolutely. Like it's gonna be interesting to see how things sort of shape up, man. But yeah, we obviously now sort of going away from RFA, and we're looking at the draft coming up, and I'm sure you do obviously the draft review on the TT side, and I think Ross and myself do sort of in the future. So we'll have to make sure we get that up and running in the build up to the draft as well.
Oh yeah, these are the most exciting times in roster wars is when you do RFA and then the draft, and then after that, like you got a little bit of a lull, but then you get practice, training camp, and off season, the preseason starting, and then it never ends here. So it's awesome.
Yeah, no, exactly, man. Any last sort of thoughts, like sort of on RFA, like how do you see things changing? How were your cuts in the end? Did you have to sort of cut down your team much, or afterwards with your 0 contracts?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. So this, like, by no means am I an expert. It's just kind of the way I do it. But when I'm rebuilding, I do a lot of waiver acquisitions during the year. So I always have a lot of trash at the end of the year. And I do a lot of waiver acquisitions because I like to flip guys. So in a rebuild, like I'll be quick. I think I had Grover Stewart. I had Zaire Franklin, like people that I bought for free. And then I'd flip for draft picks because at that point, they're not really helping you in a rebuild. I'm just trying to get a profit and help that future team out, So after RFA, I always got to empty the trash. I think I emptied like 25 players. So it's nice to be back down to a manageable amount. I know there's a thread up there that kind of talks about roster sizes, and I gave my opinion in there. I said it fluctuates based off of just all different things and different times of the year. But I think my roster's at 49 players right now, and I love it because being at a smaller roster size allows you to have a little more contract flexibility. So, what about you? Do you have to drop a lot, or?
Yeah, I ended up dropping sort of 15, 20 players. I managed to cull quite a lot of these players or trade them away before the end of the regular season last year. So I'm actually only down to about 48 now, so not too dissimilar to you. I've got about 8 rookie picks. I'm someone that likes I like the taxi squad. I like loading up the taxi squad and come and poach me, and I like sort of using the poach. Obviously, Carla and I had a bit of a little bit of beef earlier in the season, but it's all good and fun, and it's more getting the reaction out of people. And I think oh man, everyone's obviously upset when a good player gets poached, but at the same time, it's sort of how you navigate that, and that's another sort of unique aspect of roster wars. But yeah, look, I think back to sort of my squad, I'm sort of happy where it is now. I'm sort of, as you say, I think when you get sort of so addicted into this, you sort of set out your team sheet and you pre-predicting each year your RFA and basically saying, okay, if I've got 48 guys now, I want to have 15 on RFA next year and 10 and 5, and obviously it gradually decreases, and that's just sort of just squad construction really. But no, it's been pretty sweet, man. It's been good to get used to it.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing this stuff for a while. There's no league I've ever been in like this. There's some that's came close, but just the different dynamics and all the flexibility of just being able to make this thing your own. It's besides the and then you got the community and everybody in it. So I'm just happy to be here. So.
No, exactly, man. So yeah, man, I'm not sure. Like, is there anything else you wanted to touch base on before we sort of sign off on our first little episode?
No, man, like we kind of started it like this wasn't a hey, look, this is a directions that everybody needs to take or end all be all from Nate and Sam. This is just hey, some experience that we've seen and just our viewpoint, and laugh at it, take it, whatever you want. Just happy to be here talking about roster wars, talking about RFA, and just glad to be around with you, and then looking forward to the next time we get together to chop it up. So.
Yeah, man, we'll have to get the other draft reviewers on and go through different rounds of each of the individual drafts and different tactics and what everyone's going to shaking and moving. Maybe even a sneaky mock draft before things kick off in a couple of weeks' time. But no, it's been interesting.
Yeah, there's never a shortage of things to talk about around these roster wars halls. So yeah, man, appreciate everybody that is viewing, looking in, and we'll see you guys next time.
Cheers, guys.